All right, thank you. Hello, everybody. So glad you came. This is a wonderful time for me. It's something that I'm passionate about. We're going to do a talk on the great Saint Ramana Maharshi, sometimes called Sri Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. And I'd like to open with a few thank yous. I'd like to thank Rhett and Wave Street Studio for inviting me here and making this possible. I'd like to dedicate this talk to my brother Jim in New Jersey. And I'd like to thank especially Liz Murray, who really dialed out this show for me under difficult circumstances. She really gave her time. And I'd like to thank my walking partner, Shanti, who walked around the mountain with me so many times and made it a joyous event. The title of the talk, Inquire Within. That's really it. It's Inquire Within. That's what the whole talk is going to be about. I'm going to work with some cards here, and it's going to be a little bit like a musical performance. And sometimes I throw them all up in the air and pick them up, and then I read them as they go, like a John Cage classic. We also wanted to call this talk Mistaken Identity, and we wanted to call it An Inside Job. Okay, so we're going to keep that in mind. Ramana was born near the city of Madurai, which has a sensational temple. And he was athletic, he was a good swimmer, and he was popular. He was called Golden Hand because everything he touched turned to gold. And his one characteristic was that he would fall into such a deep sleep that nobody could wake him. So anybody who wanted to get revenge on him, they'd pick him up and drop him someplace. His spiritual training was extremely minimal. He read the 63 lives of the Tamil saints, and he read the 4 Gospels from the Bible. One day he was sitting around, age 16, and he was overcome with a tremendous fear of death. And also, it's possible that he may have actually died physically. And as he was going through the experience, instead of reaching for help, he said, "Oh, I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to experience it fully." And he did. He rigidified his body, he stopped his breath, and he imagined himself to be dead. And he said, "Well, the body's dead, they're going to take me to the cremation grounds, and yet something's still alive beyond that of pure consciousness." And he awakened at age 16, which is something very, very extraordinary. And in my world, we always go to the person who has the map of consciousness, of what everybody's been reaching for in all religions throughout all time, of how to wake up. And you can put your own name to it, whether it be God or pure consciousness. So they said his heart was dead for 20 minutes. The experience lasted about 28 minutes, as far as anybody knows. And he was dead on the left side, and he was alive on the right, which we'll talk about. And he said it was like a rocket bursting in air. And he had inexpressible anguish and headache soon after. He said, "I was like a speck swept away by a tremendous flash or a tremendous flood." And after that, he was never the same. And things were to happen rather quickly. His father died when he was 12 years old. And he had been separated from his mother. The family was split down the middle in 2 different houses. His father at one time punished him and said, we're going to shave your head, you're going to wear a little sort of white bikini, and you're not going to have any food. And so when Ramana was standing around, he heard the name Arunachala, which we see over here. And this is a name, they say if you hear the name Arunachala, you can get enlightened. So Arunachala. And the mountain of Arunachala is in Tiruvannamalai, which is the name of the city, which I used to pronounce incorrectly. So we think of the great American saint Vanna White, Tiruvannamalai. And there's sometimes different spellings. So as soon as he heard that, he took 2 rupees and he took off. He found out where the mountain was and he left a note to his parents, don't try to find me. I'm off. I took 2 rupees. And he sets off to the mountain. And his life was never the same against that. He didn't sign his name on that note to his parents. He never signed his name again in his life. And he never had a name ever from that day on. And he was given the name Ramana Maharshi, Sri Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, by a great teacher named Ganapati Muni many years later. So he goes to the mountain and he goes to the main temple inside and he bows to the Shiva Lingam, which is a representation of Shiva, which is what's called a fire lingam there. And he shaves his head, he puts on a little white bikini, and he's been starving for days because he doesn't have any money. So in a sense, it's a little bit of a reenactment of his father's punishment. And we'll leave it up to the Freudians to analyze that. Arunachala was called the Medicine Mountain, and it's extraordinary. There are going to be a lot of photos in here of the mountain. There's going to be a lot of photos that I won't explain. They're just going to let them rest upon your eyes. And when I talk about, almost all the words in this talk are from Ramana himself. So don't try to understand them. Don't judge them. Just let them kind of percolate through. And then later on, you can listen and hear. This is the first known photograph of Ramana. He's age 21 in this picture, even though he looks younger. And so he sat at the temple. The rats nibbled at his feet. He was completely lost in another consciousness for a long, long time. And he was found and rescued by a crazy yogi named Seshadri, and who took care of him and realized his greatness early on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start to make an interior pilgrimage. Ramana said, a great power takes you over and runs your life for you. So what he tapped into was what we are going to call the substratum, below everything that's phenomenal, that's given objects, that's being given names. And this is a profound teaching that we're getting here, and it's not mine. I'm just passing it on. I've filtered it a little bit. And there are several heroes that are involved in this transmission. The first book you want to think about is Talks with Ramana Maharshi. And then there was a fellow who lives in Tiruvannamalai named David Godman. And he's really the hero of preserving the work. And we'll talk about his books. I think my favorite recent one is called Padamalai, with this beautiful picture of Ramana. So you can see the contrast between how he was at 21 and how he was in his older age. And this is what we call a transmission picture. You look at this picture and you can become enlightened. So each question is prompted by a thought. Unless the questioner is found, such questions can never finally be answered. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going inside and we're going to be finding the questioner. Not the question and not the answer. We're going to find the questioner. The cause of your misery is not in the life outside you, it is in you as the ego. So Ramana is being taken care of. He can hardly speak anything. His parents are looking for him, and he moves from one temple to the other and then up into a cave, and eventually his mother finds him, and he's not going anywhere. He's going to stay with the program because he has no other choice. Basically, the entire world fell away. Everything became one. And so that's what we're going to be. Even in this room, we're going to be one, not a whole lot of people as individuals. And I can feel it already as everybody's dropped in. We have a wonderful group here, very special, and I thank you for that. So grace is flowing all like the ocean, ever full. Everybody draws from it according to his capacity. So grace is flowing from Ramana from that day on. And we'll see that it's not so much his intention, it's your deserving, it is your emptiness, it's your ability to just receive that becomes extraordinary. Ramana said, there is no one who has not seen God. God vision is natural to all. This is an extraordinary photograph. I'll just leave it up for a while. So Ramana is talking about the ego. And what we've done our whole lives is we've continued to create the ego. We have been taught how to create the ego. We're taught how to be somebody as part of our survival mechanisms. We're taught by everything. We're not even realize that it's possible not to live with the ego. And he says, ego's like a caterpillar. It leaves its hold only after catching another. How can the mind, which has itself created the world, accept it as unreal? Okay, this is a very important quote. How can the mind, which has itself created the world, accept it as unreal? So the first thing is that if you hear it like, oh, I'm going to tell you, oh, maybe the world's unreal, the tendency is to say, oh, what do you mean? I mean, we're here, it's real. But the idea here is just to relax and think that maybe Ramana is right. And what we're looking at, I think, is we're looking at as maybe the teacher who's going to carry over into the 21st century. In one word, to think is not your real nature. The birth of thought is itself sin. Personality is the root cause of external activities. So Ramana came to Arunachala. He never left for 54 years. He maybe moved a mile or two in one direction during the plagues. The mountain means a sort of red, immovable mountain. There's about 10 other translations of that. But let's keep that in mind. In Tamil, it's called Anamalai. It's 2,682 feet high. Doesn't seem like much, but when you climb it up, it really takes a lot. And I would take 3 hours to climb it, 3.5 hours. Ramana would climb it in an hour when he was younger. The holy books all say that the mountain, if you live within 40 miles of the mountain, you will attain enlightenment just by living there within its energetic field. It has a great story behind it. Oh, by the way, Seshadri, who saved Ramana when he was completely incapacitated, he says, Ramana said he was never caught in Maya, which is pretty good recommendation. So we're going to look at pictures of Ramana. All of these pictures of Ramana are either on public display or on altars. Here he has a vibhuti on his forehead, which is associated with Shiva. These are the footprints of the gods carved in a rock in the middle of nowhere. And if you didn't know where it was, you would never find it. This is the main temple in town where he went immediately after he arrived there. He shaved his head. So Ramana said, pradakshina, walking around the mountain in a clockwise direction, is the best thing that you can do. So a lot of people walk around the mountain. Some people walk around every day. It can take, Ramana would take 2 to 3 days to walk around. He said, you should walk around like a fully pregnant queen. So like really with consciousness. And that's something that I haven't done. I tend to walk a little faster. We usually walk around about 3.5 hours. He says, what is there superior to pradakshina? The proper way is to walk slowly as one can, like a queen in full pregnancy. He stopped walking around the mountain in 1926. So he moves up into the mountain, and there's 2 great caves up there that are still there. The first one that he moved into was called Virupaksha Cave. He was there from 1898 to 1915. And then he moved up to another cave called Skanda, and he stayed there until 1922 when his mother died. And so you can go and meditate in those caves. So my story is that I went to Tiruvannamalai in 1981. And in 1981, there were very few people there. It was just like a dusty little village. Very few Westerners went there. And I had a vision that I was going to be at Ramana's ashram for my birthday, April 10th. And when I went to get the bus, the guy said, you can't get there. I said, what do you mean? I want to be there for my birthday. And then this guy behind me says, well, if you take this other bus, it'll intersect another bus, and you can jump off, and it'll get you there. So I got there for my birthday, and I'll tell you, it was the hottest day of my entire life, since, before, during, after. And so I lay in bed for about 16 hours just hallucinating. Now, it might have been a religious experience, or it might have been just the heat. I can't tell you. And then I got up in the late afternoon, and I walked up and meditated in these caves, and I had a new mantra, and it was, get me out of here. It was blazing, blazing hot. I'm going to give you some of the qualities of Ramana a little bit early. He hasn't quite descended down to his ashram. He speaks very, very little, even though there are many, many books. He'd go whole days without talking, whole weeks without talking. And we'll talk a little bit about how people would get him to talk. The aspects of him was that he had easy access, that he was in utter normality, that he was into equality. He was precise, orderly, meticulous. He had a visible aura. Vibration you could hear. I like that a lot. He asked for nothing. He found fault with nothing. He was spontaneous, effortless, continuous, and he never wasted anything. And he would never argue, and he would never discuss. He had some health problems later on in his life we'll talk about, but he said the body itself is a disease, which is rather interesting to think about. And they say the cause of death is birth. Ramana didn't say that. I think Woody Allen did, maybe. So the key here as we're moving into Ramana's teachings is the idea of be still. Okay? Be still, and he quotes the Bible, be still and know that I am God. But we're moving into an era where there's going to be no end to stimulus. Okay? There's going to be no end to like things to do and electronic media. You know, I even have a little cell phone. It might even ring while I'm here if I'm lucky. I was the last person on earth without a cell phone. So the person within me consumes everything. Be as you are. That was really, really his teaching. People saw him morph into many, many, many different things. They saw him morph into Christ, into Muhammad, into Gandhi, into Krishna, into Buddha, into Kabir, Ram Dass, and even a Shiva Lingam, which his mother saw. And these were like really, really responsible people, you know, who were sitting with him, and they saw him morph into all of these beings. But Ramana would ever say, he would say, remember, you're looking for what does not change. All right? So even he says, the visions give zest to meditation, he said. So we're looking for that which does not change. His people who were with him said, I never saw him stretch and I never saw him yawn. I'm not sure if that's an advantage or not. He had a supreme indifference to bodily ailments. He never wore shoes. His feet were full of thorns. He slept with no pillow, half reclining. He never lay down. He rarely fell asleep. He said, sleep is resting the mind. He said, between sleep and waking, there is a momentary twilight. Just before the eye thought, there is a split second of undifferentiated pure consciousness. Okay? So as you start to come out of your sleep, see if you can catch that 1 second before you become somebody. Okay? And what we're going to be looking for is undifferentiated pure consciousness. Okay? This is something very, very extraordinary. And it may challenge some of your beliefs, but we'll see what the man says, okay? The guy who woke up is the guy that we're looking for. He said the body itself is space itself. I don't know if you had that experience where you're just pure space inside. It's an absolutely amazing experience. No weight. And he said all thoughts are threaded on I am the body. All right? And he said the fundamental error is that you think that you're the body. Okay? And if you really, really start to get that you're not the body, you're going to just make a leap into pure consciousness. Because we're all body-oriented. We're all body-focused. I am. That's what happens in yoga. But yoga is really to wake up. And he slept maybe 4 to 5 hours. He never slept after lunch. He went to sleep at 10. He would be in the kitchen cutting vegetables at 3:45 in the morning every day. And he didn't stop till late, late, late. The people who saw him said, we all felt special. He had a luminous smile, and he had the ability to transmit through his eyes, through the glance. And he said the highest teaching is in silence. So this is the holy mountain of Arunachala. And I'll go back and forth to this. This is a mountain that is older than the Himalayas. Now, we say that, Ramana would say that Shiva, Lord Shiva and Parvati live in Mount Kailash in Tibet, but that the mountain is Shiva himself. Okay, now when Ramana says the mountain is Shiva himself, we pay attention. Okay? We really pay attention. So the story is, the legend is, that Vishnu, the preserver, and Brahma, the creator, were kind of like in competition to find out who was greatest. So Shiva manifested himself into a pillar of effulgent light. And he said, whoever finds the end of this pillar of light is the greatest. So Vishnu went down as a boar, and Brahma went up as a swan. And truly, neither one ever found the end after hundreds of thousands of years. And Brahma saw a bird and plucked a little twig out of the bird's mouth and came back and said, oh, I found the end. And he didn't. He kind of fibbed. And it's why there are only maybe 2 to 3 temples in all of India to Brahma, was that one little glitch. So they came back, they bowed at Shiva's feet, and they said, basically, you demand, and by the way, your effulgent pillar of light is burning up the world. Do you think you could cool it a little bit? So he condensed himself into the mountain, into the holy mountain of Arunachala. So this is Shiva with his trident, and the mountain behind him, and Parvati. So this is this is the mountain, and once a year they have a huge pot of ghee on top of the mountain, and they set fire to the pot of ghee for 10 days. And 1.7 million people come to the mountain and walk around the mountain. And it's very intense. It's a little bit like a festival. And so this is a picture, and it's seen for 40 miles around. And it's treated very seriously. It's literally the coming of the light, the manifestation of Shiva on earth. So when we walk around the mountain, we're literally walking around Shiva. There's an inner path and there's an outer path. So the deities of the equivalent of Shiva and Parvati are in the temple. They're carried around in this enormous carriage once a year. And there's fabulous film of like 40 women pulling it, like, you know, and sweating, and it's just marvelous, marvelous shot. These are the deities on display before they're taken around the mountain. These are very unusual photographs, by the way. And this is a light inside the temple. So just listen to this just for a second. Every word coming out of his mouth had scriptural clarity and sanctity. Okay? So everybody, and including now, we treat Ramana's words with that idea, that it had scriptural clarity and sanctity. That when you're pure, particularly your throat chakra is pure, you're speaking truth. And so we're going to catch the wave here and pay attention. So self-inquiry, inquire within is really what we're talking about. So Ramana's path, what he did was he said, who am I? Self-inquiry. And what you're doing is you're turning away from all the stimulus of the world, which is unending. There's no end to it. And you're turning around, you're taking all that energy. And if you think of the holes in your body, okay, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, your genitals, your rectum, is the way that we contact the world. So what we do is we're going to close off all that external going energy, and we're going to go inside. We're going to inquire within. Okay. Ramana always gave the highest teachings first. In David Godman's book, in one of his books, he gives all the highest teachings first, and then he goes down from there. And then, you know, Ramana answered the same questions forever. It's a wonder that he put up with it. But he would give the highest teachings, and then people would say, well, what about bhakti? What about devotion? And he would drop down a level and say, oh, bhakti's great, that's really terrific. And then say, well, what about karma yoga, work? Service, and he'd say, oh, karma yoga is great. Yeah, that's a wonderful way. And what about yoga? And well, yeah, yoga is good, and you know, meditation is good. And he would answer people at the level to which they came to him. But he always gave the highest teachings first. So here we're going to stay in the highest teachings. Okay, we're going to talk about other levels, but that's it. Ramana says, why this roundabout process? Should we not state the ultimate truth and direct path at the beginning itself, rather than advocating many methods and rejecting them in the end? All right? So rather than like going, oh yeah, let's try this, let's try that, I've done this, I've done that, I've been to this teacher, I've been here, I've done this religion, I've done that religion, why not start where you're going to end up anyway? Okay? In real solid teaching and truth. So Ramana taught in silence. He would talk, but his silence was utter and complete. The Guru's silence is more vast and emphatic than all the scripture put together. He was the silence itself. This is Ganesha, overcomer of obstacles. These are within the temple, really beautiful, beautiful artwork. So this is part of the walk around the mountain. This is what you see. And so I'm not going to describe it a lot, but just let it fall onto your eyeballs as we go along. These are all statues to the snake gods, to the Nagas. Look at that fabulous rock. So Ramana said there is gunpowder, there is charcoal, and there is wet wood. He said some people are like gunpowder. You got it? Sometimes you're like charcoal and you catch and you burn, and then sometimes you're like wet wood. And I'm a little bit like wet wood, but my friends all keep the hair dryers on me. So if this was your mind, this is camphor. Ramana says the mind itself is an absolute fabrication. Okay, we're going to have to deal with this a little bit. Okay, he says it's completely made up. He said it is completely made up of thoughts. Okay, and the thoughts are not real. And the thoughts are not your natural process. So this is something to keep in mind as we're doing the teaching. You know, how are we going to approach this? So Ramana might give two different answers to the same question depending on the level of inquiry, and they would both be right within their context. He says, first know yourself. Leave alone the idea of teaching others. And then that which we want to attain is that which we already are. And he says, if you see the eyes of all others as your own, how can you exist without helping them? So there's a lot of people who say, well, if you're on this path, you know, you can't do social service and that kind of thing. But he says, love all and help all. He said years before Sai Baba was born. In this way, you can help yourself. So what's happening, if this was your mind now, okay, one of the beauties about camphor is that when camphor burns, there's nothing left. It's gone. When that light goes out, there's no ash, there's nothing left. It's completely gone. And so what happened with Ramana is that when he woke up, his mind disappeared. And so did the world for him. And so we're going to keep this metaphor in mind, so to speak, or out of mind. And people told me I'm out of my mind for years. They call Ramana the Lord of Silence. But he said it's silence in speech, silence in the eye, silence in the ear, and silence in the mind. Okay? Very important to keep that in mind. And they said the sage is in silence always, even when he speaks. Okay? So it's nan-yar with my bad pronunciation. Who am I? He says you can either do the self-inquiry or you can surrender to the Guru. And the Guru is God. So you have your kind of two choices of the path that you want to do. He says this is the one infallible means, the only direct path. He says it's for all religions. It's often for ripe souls. And he says it's like a stick, the self-inquiry that you stir the funeral ashes and pyre with. Okay? So you stir the ashes of the cremation ground and you stir it, and then eventually your stick is gone. The stick itself is burned up, the self-inquiry is burned up, and you awaken. Tear everything away until there is nothing but the source of all remains like always in the present. There is no past and no future except in the mind. Okay. Now we hear this. We hear it on Oprah Winfrey. We hear it from Eckhart Tolle. We hear it from all different people. But people kind of like, it's sort of like Karuna Mai says. She says, is it service or is it lip service? Okay. I give a lot of things lip service, and I apologize. Correcting oneself is correcting the whole world. Become envious of anyone lower than you. You must become very small. In fact, you must become nothing. Only a person who is nobody can abide in the self, with a capital S. He says, patience, tolerance, more tolerance. So these are some of the beautiful things that you see walking around the mountain. This is a woman who, what she does is she picks up the trash around the mountain, and she brings the consciousness to all the Indians and everybody who trashes the mountains frequently. And everybody sees her, and they pay attention, and they behave better because of what she does. This is a man with the mountains in the background. He's rolling physically around the temple. This is the new temple of India. It's called the movie theater. It was a movie theater. That's where the Indians go to church now. Go to the cinema. This is a deity named Narasimha, and it's in a cave called the Mango Cave. This is the inside of it, and you can sit in there and meditate, and it's quite profound. Ramana lived there. Ganapati Muni lived there, who's the one who named Ramana. See the changes, like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? There's the mountain reflected. When Ramana came, the mountain was completely bare, and they're doing enormous reforestation work. This is an ad for it. So David Godman says, how do you ask a question of a guy who doesn't talk, who's just lying there in complete awakened pure consciousness? He says, first of all, you have to have an earnest question. Then you have to wait patiently. You have to be simple and brief. Ramana would start to speak, and Godman says that he would gather momentum. No interruptions. Be still. Never discuss. The purpose is always to turn inward, to make you see the light within yourself. Okay. Ramana always spoke positively about people, and I learned a great lesson about this because I heard somebody died, and I said, well, I won't talk about it. I said something like, well, I heard he wasn't such a nice guy. And then I read Ramana, and this guy died, Kandaswami, and nobody liked him. Everybody hated him. And everybody ran to Ramana, like in a group, to think, what was he going to say? And because nobody liked this guy. And they said, well, this guy died. And Ramana said, yes, he was always very clean. And he was always well dressed. So when I catch myself, going to say something negative, I always say, he was always very clean. Yes, he was always very well dressed. So it's good to kind of catch your mind going on that. You always have a desire for something or other. I never desire anything, said Ramana. False consciousness divides itself in the external world and the internal perceiver. Complete cessation of the addiction to non-self. Okay, that's it. This is an addiction that we're talking about. It may even be a virus that spread entirely around the world of thinking and thoughts, and that what Ramana is saying is there's something going on behind that. And maybe if we're still enough and we're lucky enough to find a master, we'll figure it out. These are some of the yogis that are living on the mountain. There are all kinds of people around. There's people awakened. There's people walking around. You would never know who they are. And the people with interior vision say inside of the mountain is full of caves and yogis meditating and all kinds of wonderful things that you just have to have the experience on, and you'll see. The addiction to the non-self. The self is the self. Wow. The self is the self. Now this is with a capital S, okay? And basically Ramana says the self is also Godded. There is nothing that remains in opposition to him. So Ramana is called a sage. In India he's called a jnani, J-N-A-N-I, okay? A jnani is rare, a real awakened being. They say that gods come to sit at the feet of the jnani, of the sage, of the wise one. And Ramana was a sage. He was a jnani. They call flattery the vile harlot. He says Bhakti is the mother of jnana. It's better to keep devotion secret, he said, which I thought was rather interesting. So here he is, he's awakened, and all these people start to come, and they say he weeps with them, he laughs with them, he sings with them. His presence is like a pure, transparent mirror. It reflects the image exactly as it is. The jnani is ever in ecstasy and fullness, sporting in the space of consciousness. The seeing entity within him died. He says even death obeys him. His stillness is like the apparent stillness of a fast rotating gyroscope. You've seen a gyroscope, it looks like it's not moving at all. So they say an avatar is one aspect of God, but a jnani is God himself. So Ramana's brother came to stay with him, and he eventually he cooked in the kitchen, and then he ran the ashram. And he was a little bit afraid of Ramana, and Ramana always, 99% of the time, supported him, even when people complained. And his brother chose his attendants. Ramana would say, "Poda, go away." Two beings attained enlightenment with Ramana. His mother. His mother died in 1922. They say he was rough with his mother as he was training her to awaken. So, for example, as a widow, she was very, very opposed to onions, as were the Brahmins. And so Ramana would tease her and say, "Look, this onion bulb is going to keep you out of heaven." And she would cry, and he'd say, "Go ahead and cry." And then when she died, he had his hand underneath on her head and her other hand over her heart, and she was reabsorbed. She died. And I'll tell you a little bit more of the story in a minute. And the other being that attained enlightenment was Lakshmi the cow, who always used to walk into the hall and bow at his feet. And now, I have heard two different stories that Lakshmi had 9 calves, and 4 of them were born on Ramana's birthday, and that she had 13 calves, and 9 of them were born on his birthday. So you can do the statistics on that. Ramana said distance does not exist. Okay, we're talking about time and space. We're talking about reorienting our entire training to another level of consciousness. So just let it percolate in. said, reality is one. How can it be realized? Who's going to realize it if it's one? There's not anybody to realize. So they say there's never been an individual person who's attained enlightenment. Realization is thus an illusion. Reverse the direction of your search. Okay? I mean, I go to India, I've been around the world, 12 times, and all of that. And I also know I don't have to go anywhere, but reverse the direction of your search. We're going to go inside, we're going to say, who am I? And we're going to trace the thoughts and the emotions and everything like a string back to the source of where everything begins. Okay? One analogy was if the sun's coming in and it hits a mirror and the light from the mirror illuminates our room, this is our reality, but it's not. Okay, we're saying, oh, okay, we're going to follow the light back, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We're going to go into the mirror, we're going to bounce off the mirror back to the sun. Okay, we're going to go back to the source. Okay, so when you're sitting, be still inside of yourself, you're looking for the source. Isn't this beautiful? There were days when the fog would just rotate around the top of the mountain actively. It was really that's what it was doing on this day. And so now what's happened is they made a movie in India in which the couple went to Arunachala and they walked around on the full moon and they had some big awakening or some wonderful thing happen. So now every full moon 100,000 people come and walk around the mountain for exactly that reason. So these are the people walking around the mountain. They're looking on there. It's full moon, and they're all stopping to look at the mountain, and they're treating it as Shiva himself. You see, they're saluting in the lower left-hand corner there. So there's an outer path with all the temples and all the stores, and then there's an inner path, which is all the nature that you get to see in this picture. These are holy feet. This is one of the teachers blessing anybody who wants to come by. This is watching the sunset from up behind the ashram. Okay, attaining the self is like a business transaction. This is good for now, as the stock market is soaring. A business transaction in which one receives the true, ancient, primal essence in return for the reflection, the ego. And David Godman says this is extremely profitable. Okay, it's like a business transaction. You give up your ego, you give up your identity, and you get everything. There is no one who has not seen God. We said before, God vision is natural to all. So the question is, how is God to be seen? Ramana was asked. He said, within. If the mind is turned inward, God manifests as inner consciousness. You're not going to find God outside first. The present alone exists. To attempt to understand the past and the future without having ascertained the truth of the now is like trying to count without the number 1. Kind of fun, huh? You try it? Try to count without the number 1? The outside mind dissolved of its own accord when deprived of anything to hold on to, just as the fire dies down and goes out when deprived of fuel. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the mind as we go inside, and we're just going to ignore it. See, everybody's in meditation. They're fighting the mind. They're trying to control their thoughts. You just deprive it of attention. Okay, you just deprive it of attention. You just don't give it any juice. And it's a really, really interesting practice. Individuality and mind functions are coexistent. The one cannot exist without the other. So the highest state, sahaja, nirvana, kalpa, nirvana, light in a windless place, ocean without waves. There is no movement. Okay? There's no movement. They cannot find anything which is different from themselves. Okay, so one of the analogies is like being an axle and the whole world is revolving around you. You're just sitting stopped and everything else will move around. The world shines through your existence, but your being does not depend on the existence of the world. When I went to Mexico to do my advanced polarity training in 1979, I was amazed the world went on without me. It was astonishing revelation. Okay, are you ready for this? You are the being consciousness that shines as the state for the drama. You are not the actor. That shines as the stage for the drama. You are not the actor. You are the being consciousness that shines as the stage for the drama. Okay? So when you're involved in drama, when you're out there and everything's being stirred up, and a lot of people like to say all the world's a stage and we are but actors. Well, Shakespeare just missed the boat a little bit. He should have gone to India. He says, you are not the actor. The silent self is alone God. Self alone is the ancient world. So we see the word ancient. So we're going back. We're going back in time, trying to find something lost or that was never lost. It's just covered over. He says, going and coming exist in the mind. When Ramana said, you never go anywhere, it really struck me because I travel so much. You never go anywhere. Isn't that nice? So that's what the surrounding country looks like. The city itself is big, busy. The ashram is on the southern side. So that's Amachi on the right, Ramana in the middle, and a yogi who was a beggar who attained enlightenment on the left there. If you realize the self, there will be no one to have experiences. The world is only thoughts. Okay? And it's possible. You don't have to fight the thoughts. You just have to watch them. We're all repeating the same thoughts all the time. I mean, if you really thought about the number of thoughts that were useless and wasted, you'd just fall right over. The state of the sage is consciousness being aware of nothing other than itself. Imperishable, unmoving axle that spins this world like a wheel. Shiva, the mountain, is the still center of consciousness. This is a goddess rusted sign by the side of the road. This is a famous story about a guy who saw a statue of Shiva and his eyes were injured and he plucked his own eye out to give to the statue and he was just about to take the other one out and Shiva appeared to him and said, that's not a good idea, and he restored his sight. But it's a symbol of devotion. You know, what does it take, you know, where you just give everything, even your eyesight? Would you? This is the anthills by a yogi's cave, and there's cobras that come out at night. Shiva trident with lemons on the top. Cast all your cares on the Lord. Remember, the Lord is the universe. is one who carries all burdens. This is what happens when you get out of the way, when you're no longer an individual and you're completely merged in pure consciousness. You get taken care of. You get to the right place at the right time. You get provided for. There were times when Ramana had like 20 grains of rice, and he made a boiling pot of water, and he threw the 20 grains of rice in. And 10 minutes later, a guy shows up with potatoes. It's like stone soup, except that everybody showed up. And then the guy showed up with raisins and figs. And then pretty soon they had this fabulous meal, and everybody ate. But he never wanted, it just appeared. You do not acquire happiness. Your very nature is happiness. That's a hard one. Heaven and hell, there must be someone to go through. My friend Glenn has a sign on his refrigerator that says, if you're going through hell, keep on going. The attempt to recall one's past is a waste of time. Now, is it lip service or is it service, okay? Because we hear all the teachers telling us, like, oh yeah, the past is a canceled check, Sai Baba said, and all of this, but nobody really believes it. Or there's like no future. But if there's no future and there's no past, there's really no now. See, that's the trick. It just is. Who was a famous singer in Hawaii. Self-reform automatically brings about social reform. In truth, all right, nothing visual exists. What is not in you cannot appear outside. Appearance implies disappearance. Okay. Now this is a real hard one for people, but when you get it, it's obvious. Okay. But everybody says the truth cannot. Nobody can tell you the truth. You can suggest it, but it's an experience that you have. Ramana couldn't teach it. Nobody could teach it. But you have to follow the wisdom. You have to follow the sage. You have to follow the thought back to the source, and then have your own experience and see if there's a confirmation or not. There was one episode with Ramana where he said 4 times, "Enough! Enough!" to these people who were questioning him. Enough! Enough of this rubbish. So Ramana could get a little put off sometimes by all of the questionings. Ramana says no one succeeds without effort. Mind control is not one's birthright. So the idea of this whole process of awakening is you have to want it. Okay? You have to want it bad. You have to want it to pluck out your own eyes. You have to want it as if a drowning person going for air or somebody with fire going to put it out. Their clothes are on fire. That's how much you have to want it. You have to want it totally. And if you want it and you're totally sincere, you will get what you want. That's the story. Bottom line. Isn't that lovely? Mahatma Gandhi was there. If there is an image reflection, there must be a source. Okay? Everything is reflected image. Everything that you see. Okay? It's all reflected. And if you get that, who's having the experience? You go back inside and you trace it back to the source, It's not out here. It's not the reflection of the cards or my blue shirt or anything. Ramana broke taboos with women in relation to their menstrual cycle. He allowed them in. He broke taboos in relation to the Brahmins, who were always a problem. So the technique that we're talking about is called Advaita in traditional Indian parlance. And Advaita traditionally means non-dualism. And the trick is that now Advaita is becoming commonly known. Now they're trying to make it something, right? We're trying to make it a philosophy. We're trying to make it an idea. So we're trying to rigidify everything that we're trying to de-rigidify. So we have to be really careful. So the books, the main book that I send you to besides Ramana is I Am That, by Interviews with Nisargadatta. It is the classic of the 20th century. I would send you to any series of books by Adyashanti, Emptiness Dancing, The Impact of Awakening, The End of Your World as You Know It, I think might be his last book. He's a very sharp teacher. There's a series of books by Premananda that's new, called Interviews with European Masters and Interviews with Indian Masters, and the third one's going to be Interviews with American and Australian Masters. All thought is from a single thought. I am the body. I'll tell the story about Papaji. David Godman wrote a 3-volume book on Papaji called Nothing Ever Happened. My favorite title. So Papaji in the old days is up in northern India. From his childhood he is saying, have you seen God? Do you know anybody who has? And every holy man he comes, he asks the same problem. And one day this guy, same question, and this guy comes to his door and says, yeah, I have. And he's down in southern India, and here's how you get to his place. You go to Madras, and then you take a train, and then you take a bus, and then you take a bullock cart, and you go to Tiruvannamalai, to this ashram. So he gets a job. He moves his family down to Madras from northern India. He's got 10 days before work starts. He's been given a little advance. He takes the train, he takes the bus, he takes the cart. He gets off, he walks into the ashram, and he walks into the hall. And the guy who's sitting there is the guy who came to his door in northern India. He's furious. He's totally furious. He rages out of the ashram. He rages to the bullock cart. He's just about to jump in, and the guy says, excuse me, sir, you seem very upset. What's the matter? And he tells him the whole story, and they said, it's the same guy. And he says, I'm sorry, Ramana has not left the ashram for 24 years. There was the Lakshman Swami, who in 1949, a year before Ramana passed, awakened in Ramana's presence within the first 2 or 3 days. And he wrote a note, I have awakened in your presence. He handed it to Ramana. Ramana smiled, put it on the shelf. Lakshman left. He didn't speak for 13 years. He's still alive. So, Ramana says, okay, this is a really good one. I want you to keep this in mind. Whatever is not destined to happen will not happen. Try as you may. Whatever is destined to happen will happen. Do what you may to prevent it. This is certain. Therefore, remaining silent is good. So Ramana was known for the glance, for the transmission. He almost never touched people and didn't let people touch his feet like that. And so he said that the minute a jnani's, a wise one's eye falls on a thing, there starts a divine automatic action which itself leads to the highest good. And Ramana actually said in English, divine automatic action. So Ramana's English was good. He spoke Malayalam, he spoke Tamil, he spoke Telugu, he knew Sanskrit, he could write phenomenal poetry in verse. He was just amazing. So he said the Guru can't grant self-realization nor God. Woo! Okay, he said you got to do it. Really, the Guru is none other than the self. I had no personal will whatsoever. The guru removes obstacles. This is kind of fun. A wrong done to a guru cannot be rectified even by God. All gurus are one, and none of them is the form you see. Please keep that in mind. Good guys, bad guys. Shirdi Sai Baba. Cutting your hair, part of the ritual. If you ask for something and you get it, you say, I'll cut my hair. This is Ramesh Balsekar, who was the translator for Nisargadatta. He was a wonderful fellow. He passed. He lived in Bombay. He wrote many, many books. And he came up with the idea that there's the mind that takes care of business, and then there's the mind that doesn't exist, right? So he was known for this idea, and he became quite popular for it. But, you know, when you get the teaching, you got to listen to the teaching. Ramana says the mind itself does not exist. Does not exist. The camphor is gone. So, your mind, my mind, all of your minds, your mind. These are some of the teachers that live around the mountain. This is a Divine Mother in full trance. This was the beggar saint who became a saint. Everybody ignored him. Nobody gave him money. He sat by the gate for 15 years, and then one day he woke up. This is one of the Western teachers who became one of his followers. Lee Lozowick, he recently passed. He was very highly respected. Tattoos all over his arms. This is Werner, a friend of mine. He lived in a cave for 12 years. He teaches at Tiruvannamalai. He's a wonderful teacher, very sincere. This is a guy named Cesar from Venezuela who's teaching Advaita, non-dualism. And these guys, they're in the trenches. You know, when your mind wanders, they stay with you. And they bring you back, and they bring you back, and they bring you back. I can't do that, but I admire them tremendously. This is Fingernail Swami with the long beard down to the wrapped in a circle on the floor. But how sincere is this life? This is what he looked like as a young man. Isn't that amazing? This is Tuli Baba. This is a picture of a picture. He's a very highly respected teacher in Tiruvannamalai with a following. And this is a picture of him on the street walking. All gurus are one, and none of them is the form you see. So the guru pushes from without and exerts a pull from within, and he prepares the interior, or she prepares the interior. The guru is the formless, omnipresent expanse of consciousness. And Ramana talks about love. Okay? Self, with a capital S, is only love. The heart of all religions. Seeing only love, hearing only love, feeling only love, tasting only love, smelling only love, which is bliss. The heart, pure awareness, it is both within and without. It has no inside or out. It's not a chakra. It's the source of the ego, the self. It's the place of union. Ramana says something very, very unique. Okay? He says that when you awaken and you pierce all the chakras and you're out of the top of your head, theoretically you're awake. Then he says you have to drop back in through the Ananda Kosha, the Ananda sheath, into the heart on the right. 2 fingers to the right of the center of your heart. Okay? And he quotes the Bible in Ecclesiastes. Ramana quotes the Bible very well. And he says, the fool lives in his heart on the left, and the wise man lives in his heart on the right. Ecclesiastes 10:2. The whole of Vedanta, this is all the Hindu teachings, Ramana says, is in I am that I am, and be still and know that I am God. That's pretty radical for a major Hindu teacher. Isn't this beautiful? Ramana would have his head shaved and his beard shaved on full moon. So you could almost tell, where he was in relation to the cycles of the moon. This is my friend John, who runs the archives. All of the 3,000 photographs of Ramana are preserved. All the books are under temperature controlled. All the relics are under temperature control. It's sort of like a sacred battery that's vibrating and held for all of us on the planet. And he's doing an amazing job. And he has a classic Royal Enfield, 1998. This is my teacher. His name is Nana Garu. As a young man, this is a transmission photo. He attained awakening under the lineage of Ramana. He didn't meet him. He met him on the etheric plane. Look at those incredible eyes. This is, he has 100,000 women followers in Andhra Pradesh. So these are all women, and they're getting ready for the lighting of their fire. When the fire is lit in the temple, they communicate to the top of the mountain. They light the mountain fire, and then hundreds of thousands of people light their fires in honor of that. This is the Ulapai tree in the entrance of the ashram. I think this is the wisest person in the ashram, actually. This is Ramana's tomb, decorated for the festival. He's buried here. His mother's in the side temple over here. People come in and they walk around the tomb. They sing every evening of the week holy words from Ramana that are quite extraordinary, and it's very beautiful. And the people do it every day, and they never miss a day. This is the lighting of the fire when it's first seen, and everybody's heart just jumps every year. It's around December 1. This is at the ashram itself. And the mountain is Shiva himself. This is Ramana in a pose that's traditionally associated with a teacher named Dakshinamurti, who's always on the south side of the temple, and he's on the south side of the mountain. So Ramana, in a sense, is assuming that pose either consciously or unconsciously. Many people thought he was Dakshinamurti, and Dakshinamurti was known for teaching in silence. This is Anandamoyi Ma, a very rare photograph of her with her husband. She lived up in Hardwar. She was the great woman teacher of her age. She came to Ramana's tomb after he died, and she said, "Ramana was the sun, we are his rays." We wish you a Happy New Year. Offerings. They put a little piece of cow dung in the middle with a flower on it. Vishnu. Ramana said, this is the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven mentioned in the Bible and this world are not two different regions. This is the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven mentioned in the Bible and this world are not two different regions. The self is not attained by doing anything, but by remaining still and being as you are. It said Ramana was never aware of the passage of time. The aim of all practices is to give up all practices. Whoa! People have a really hard time with that. And this is like no church, no ritual, no this, no that. You know, it's really, really hard for people to grab. So you go back to the source of the breath. There's always the analogy of the cinema screen. I'm going to read this, and you don't have to even think about it. The Shankaracharya said, Brahman is real, God is real, the universe is unreal, and the universe is Brahman. Shankaracharya died several hundred years ago at the age of 32. The mind is a thief to the self. When you see that the mind invents everything, all will vanish. Dissolve the mind. Ramana says the mind is a complete fabrication. And all you have to do is stop, be still, don't move, ignore the thoughts. The self is unknowable, but it can be experienced by direct perception. Okay, which is why I can't teach it. Ramana couldn't teach it. Okay, the self is unknowable, but it can be experienced by direct perception. Ramana's weapon. What was Ramana's weapon? All the gods had weapons, you know. Durga had 12 weapons. Ramana's weapon was, to whom are these experiences happening? Okay, so when you're doing self-inquiry, no matter what's going on, rather than getting involved with objects and definitions and concepts, you go back inside, you reverse the direction, and you go inside, you inquire within. Who am I? You follow it back to the source, and you say, to whom are these experiences happening? Nothing that happens in them, I'm going to skip a bunch here just for fun. Nothing that happens in the mind is you, and none of it is your business. World, ego, personal, God equals unreality. Only absolute God does not, only the absolute, God does not know anything. Destiny is a result of past action already decided. As long as the individuality lasts, there is free will. When Ramana died, there was a meteor that shot across the sky. It was seen by millions of people all across India. Before he died, Life magazine came to see him. And there's an issue of Life magazine, October 1949, with a 7-page spread of Ramana. He had cancer of his arm. They operated on him 4 times. He didn't care about it. And somebody said Ramana's death was a non-event. He said, where am I? Everybody's worried about him dying. He said, where am I going to go? And there was one woman who stayed. Everybody left the ashram. They'd abandoned. Ramana's dead. And this woman had like searing in her head. Like, where am I going to go? I'm right here. And she went, okay, I'm staying. And now hundreds of thousands of people come to the ashram every year. I love this picture. So some people saw the meteor, some people saw a column of light 20 feet high, 1.5 feet wide for 2 minutes. Okay, I'm just going to read a few more and then we're going to conclude. All that is required is that you should give up regarding the unreal as real. Expel the conceptualizing. Never abandon the substratum. Okay? Pure consciousness is what we're talking about. When the ego's out of the way, the identity's out of the way, and you've stopped, and the thoughts have really receded, you're in the land of pure consciousness. And it's okay just to stay there. It's okay to do nothing. Just relax. 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 What a concept. Reach the self, the land of consciousness, the reality, which is your own country. Shun residence in a foreign land. In reality, there is neither cause nor effect, nor any action, nor does anything actually ever happen. There is neither a world nor a dweller in it. The individual and his attachments are in effect non-existent. I like this picture. The heart is self-luminous. Light arises from the heart and reaches the brain, which is the seat of the mind. The world is seen with the mind, that is, by the reflected light of the self. So don't think about any of this stuff. You'll get indigestion. Just relax. Listen to the DVD later. Say, oh yeah, that's good. Love is not different from the self. Love of an object is of an inferior order and cannot endure. Whereas the self is love. In other words, God is love. Okay, we've got 3 more cards here. Are you ready? Okay, let's move. See what Ramana has to say. Ooh, look at that face. This is Life magazine. 1949, 7-page spread. Okay, knower, knowing, known is false. Seer, seeing, seen is false. Mental superimposition on the underlying state of silence. These are the reflected light of consciousness, not pure consciousness itself. The summit of the supreme mountain, the expanse of consciousness. Okay? So once you enter into that expanse of consciousness, it's okay. It's okay just to sit there. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. What a thought. heart, the center which sucks in everything. You have the resting mind of the heart, and then you have the variety of phenomena. Okay? There's always going to be phenomena. There's no end to phenomena. Okay? So what you do is you give up definition, you give up objects, you give up conceptualizing, and you go back inside, away from the phenomena, and you find the source inside that's experiencing all of these phenomena. And you trace it back. And you're sitting silent, and you just go back, 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 back. And you do this eventually 24/7. The variety of phenomena is the outgoing mind. This is Ramana's brother, who ran the ashram. And this is the 2-page spread in Life magazine. Now, this is 8 months before he died. Nirvana is perfection. In the perfect state, there is neither subject nor object. There is nothing to see, nothing to feel, nothing to know. Seeing and knowing are the functions of the mind. In nirvana, there is nothing but the blissful, pure consciousness, I am. Nirvana is perfection. In the perfect state, there is neither subject nor object. There is nothing to see, nothing to feel, nothing to know. Seeing and knowing are the functions of the mind. In nirvana, there is nothing but the blissful, pure consciousness, I am. This was a poster that was made for Ramana's birthday in 2010. And you can see how Ramana's coming out of pure consciousness, and he's just checking you out. What happens if he appears? He goes, hey, how are you?
He did.
So let's just sit quietly for a minute. Uncross your legs, sit up straight.
That was easy. That was easy.
Okay, you can open your eyes. Okay, that's the whole story.